So we will call the SKIP Executive Board meeting for Friday, May 15th, 2026 to order. And I'd like to welcome everyone. And Dorsal, would you please call roll?
Yes, ma'am. Nancy Backus.
Here.
Dana Ralph.
Here.
Liz Steed is out. Anya is Supanik.
Here.
Christina Solstice.
I am here.
Jean Axinger. You're very soft, but I did hear you. Is Brian Davis? Victoria Schroff let me know that she would not be able to make it. Deedham Pearson, are you here? Okay. Eric Zimmerman.
I'm present.
Thank you. Carmen Rivera.
Here.
James Lovell. Dennis Martinez.
Here.
Jelani Jackson.
I'm here.
With 9 board members present, you have achieved quorum, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dorsal. Right, so the roll call is also used for introductions, but we have people that are not on the board that join us on a regular basis, especially the amazing staff working group and members of the SKIP Advisory Board. So Dorsal, I'm going to turn it over to you to help facilitate those introductions.
Thank you, Chair. I believe, Reagan, would you like to say hello?
Hi, everyone. My name is Reagan Wheelock. I am Programs Director for Disability Empowerment Center. This is my first year on the advisory board, and I am very happy to be here. So thanks for having me, all.
Welcome.
Michaela, would you like to go next?
Sure. Good afternoon, Michaela Daffern, she, her pronouns, and I work at King County's Department of Community and Human Services.
Marina.
Good afternoon, Marina Hanson. I'm the Human Services Manager for the City of Kent, supporting Mayor Ralph.
Angie.
There, thank you. Almost technical issues, but I worked through it. Got a little scared. Angie Mathias, Long Range Planning Manager for the City of Renton, supporting Carmen and James Alberson.
Matt.
Good afternoon, everybody. Matt Torpy, City of Maple Valley Community Development Manager, staff work group. And unfortunately, we don't have executive representation today. I will not be filling in for Victoria or Deedham. Just taking notes. Thanks.
And we have a SKIP panelists, if you'd like to say hello. I believe that's everyone, Mayor, Chair.
All right. Thank you very much. Welcome to everyone on this kind of gloomy Friday, but it is Friday, so we'll take that. Dorsal, do we have any agenda modifications?
No, ma'am.
All right, we'll move to public comment. This is the time on the agenda for public comment, and if you would like to make a comment and are attending online, please use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. You'll have 3 minutes to make your remarks, and please state your name and city of residence for the record. Is there anyone online, Dorsal, that has indicated they want to provide public comments?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And there's no one in person, right?
No, ma'am.
All right. All right. Well, then we will move on to the approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the March 20th, 2026 meeting minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the approval of the minutes of the March 2026 Skip Executive Board meeting, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. The minutes have been approved. Moving to resolutions, we have resolution number 2026-02, a resolution establishing an in-person location for regular public attendance of the Skip Executive Board. And this is to ensure the public has access to Skip Executive Board meetings. OPMA requires that we provide an in-person location for the community to attend. Today, we'll briefly consider Resolution 2026, which would establish our monthly meeting location at the City of Auburn City Hall Annex, where the Skip staff offices are located. Dorsal, I'll turn it over to you for more.
Thank you, Chair. Not too much more to say on this. Just wanted to inform the board that, between last month's meeting, this month's meeting, I've been working closely with staff work group and Auburn City staff to just clarify and clean up some of our meeting procedures. We determined that we did need to provide an in-person location for both the executive and advisory board. Earlier this month, the advisory board passed a similar resolution establishing conference room 2 here at the Auburn City Hall Annex as the in-person meeting location. Skip staff will be here and available for the public to attend our meetings moving forward if the resolution is adopted. And that's really all I have on that one.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Dorsal? All right, if not, is there a motion to approve resolution number 2026-02? So moved. Thank you.
Second.
Is there a second? Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of resolution number 2026-02, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Resolution 2026-02 passes. Excuse me. Resolution number 2026-03, a resolution adopting the 2027 SKIP work plan and budget. So each year, as you know, the board adopts a work plan and budget to guide our efforts for the following year. And this process began with the survey in January and continued throughout our workshop in March. And with the input from the SKIP Advisory Board, the staff working group, SKHHP, and other staff has developed the final draft for our review and consideration today. And the board and member cities must adopt the plan by the end of June to align with the county's legislative process. So with that bit of introduction, Dorsal, I will turn it over to you for more.
Thank you, Chair. Just one moment as I get the slideshow set up. Is it showing correctly?
It's not in presentation mode. There we go. Perfect.
Thank you. So I'm very excited to be here this afternoon with you all to present the draft of the 2027 work plan and budget. Just really quickly, the SKIP's mission is to create a coordinated, comprehensive, and equitable approach to increasing housing stability, reducing homelessness, and producing and preserving quality, affordable housing in South King County. And our purpose really is that all parties have a responsibility to act cooperatively to address housing stability by combining public funding with private sector resources. And of course, most importantly, is just keeping in mind the communities and the people that we are here serving, not only with the work plan adoption today, but also a little bit later when we talk about the Housing Capital Fund guidelines as well. So here is just a brief review of the work plan and budget development timeline for this year. While we were not able to review the draft at the April meeting, I was able to use your survey results and our work in March to build what I believe is a strong draft. I did not include any elements in the work plan draft that were not discussed by the executive board at our March workshop. During the workshop in March, there was some discussion about the potential for having a mid-year check-in for the 2027 work plan since we're developing it in a moment of transition for SKIP. I did speak with the staff work group, and there would be some challenges with potentially amending or modifying the work plan after adoption. The ILA does require that all member legislative bodies take action on the work plan. And so if we were to amend the work plan, we would need King County to adopt the amendment before it were to become effective. The reason we developed we're developing the work plan so early in the year, as the chair mentioned in the introduction, is because it can be a little bit of a lengthy process to have the county adopt the work plan. And so I would be happy to try and address any challenges or concerns related to wanting a mid-year check-in, but it's more likely that we should aim for the 2027 work plan to be somewhat flexible and then really refocus our intent during the development of the 2028 work plan. And just as a reminder, the only item that was removed from the draft work plan was updating the housing inventory dashboard, which is something that we only do in even number years. I'll touch on the final language for action item 6 here on the next slide, but I did want to mention that we did add action item 21 and action item 22 to the work plan, which will have SKIP staff working on both recruitment in 2027 and also developing a deeper understanding of the options available to SKIP as we consider growth and expansion in the years to come. And then finally, we did elevate action item 5 to a high priority and modified the language for action item 20 to recognize that we have begun the implementation and are moving into refinement and contract compliance. And then lastly, we will be holding a legislative forum in 2027 since we're holding the Affordable Housing Tour this year, and we alternate every year between the tour and the forum. So based off of the survey results in January and feedback from the board in March, I did work with the SOKIO planners group to develop action item 7, which would establish a special focus area for our work in 2027 related to inclusionary zoning. Based on SOKIO's feedback, I would recommend that we include the above language for action item 6, but we remove the identified shared policy goals. So basically, instead, we would focus in 2027 on developing, facilitating a review of inclusionary zoning models, and then developing a really strong report that we would present to the executive board. And then moving to the budget, I briefly want to talk about 2 different amounts that you will see in the budget. In 2025, the board took action to maintain the interest collected on the Housing Capital Fund and maintain that in a reserve. So between the interest earned from the start of SKIP to 2024 and the interest that was earned last year, SKIP has $1,026,983 in our reserve. And you can see that listed at the bottom of your budget and the agenda packet. A separate amount from the reserve, which you will see at the top of the budget, we refer to as the spend down balance. This is a balance that SKIP has accumulated in our account through a number of different, often not repeatable savings or different elements. An example of that would be that right now there's only one full-time staff person working at SKIP. And so there's some salary savings that are occurring in our account. Because of these various things, this means that we've built up almost $400,000 in our account that we can spend down. And SKIP has been using this amount the last several years to offset increasing the operational contributions. You'll be able to see that here in a few slides, and you can also see that referenced in the budget in your agenda packet, literally labeled spend down balance. I just really wanted to clarify why those are 2 different amounts and why they appear separately. So moving on to talk about the operational contributions, the SKIP staff recommendation would be to maintain the 2027 operational contributions at the 2026 level. We are currently leveraging our existing fund balance, but it's important to note that that means that, as you can see, like underneath the subtotal, there's still a balance that we're spending down to ultimately cover the operations of SKIP. And so there will be a need at some point in the future to have that conversation around raising operational contributions. Holding steady for this year provides our member jurisdictions an much needed fiscal stability during some of the economic uncertainty that we're feeling. But you'll note that in the language in Resolution 2603, SKIP staff is being directed to look at transitioning budget development to a cost performance index-based methodology, and really ensuring that as we move forward and build our budgets, we're able to provide greater data and just greater sense of precision and understanding as we're moving forward with raising contributions. So moving on briefly to talk about the expenses, I work closely with the City of Auburn staff here to determine the salaries and benefits, which did increase as they do every year. I'll go into more detail about the professional services on the next slide, but want to talk about some of the other expenses first. So the interfund allocation listed here refers to the cost of technology and IT support for SKIP staff. It appears that over the past 2 budget cycles, we've increased this fund by roughly 14%. In my research, this is an amount that is consistent with a new organization that is implementing new technologies. Since that is no longer a description I felt that fit SKIP, this year the interfund allocation has only increased by 10%, which is my understanding is more consistent with where our organization is currently. The office space that you see listed refers to the support that SKIP receives from the City of Auburn for the office space that we use. It is zeroed out by a matching $12,000 that you'll see in the revenues above. I did maintain the supply line item at $2,000. While this is a category that SKIP has historically underspent in, we will bringing on at least 1 new staff member, and so I wanted to ensure that we had supply coverage for that. And then lastly, just as a reminder, the administrative agency, the 10% admin fee that you see at the bottom is the cost or the amount that we pay to the City of Auburn for serving as our host city. And then here you can see a full breakdown of what the professional services and the budget are suggested to be in 2027. It's kind of a wide catch-all of many things. You can see here that we have $30,000 set aside for a housing capital fund contract and legal work associated with that. We do have advisory board compensation, and then another one that I will call out is the third-party capital fund application reviews. The $6,000 here means that we'll be able to have up to 3 applications in the 2026 funding round reviewed by a third party to ensure that they're strong applications. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or discuss the draft work plan and the budget.
Thank you, Dorsal. Looks like James has a question.
Yeah, just checking my mic. Does my mic work?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Dorsal, can you go back, I don't know, 6 slides? And sorry, you're all denied the dismay of seeing my face. I can't figure out my peripherals. I'm working from home. Couldn't make it in person. When you were, there was some language you struck from the legislative thing. I think there was a red line involved. Okay, maybe more like 10 slides. Yeah, maybe 15. Do you know what I'm talking about, Dorsal?
Was it the special focus area?
Yeah. And so show me the new language again. Okay. Of inclusionary zoning models and feasibility requirements. So this is a case where I don't think that's quite, I feel like that's going to raise questions. Like the previous language, go back 1 slide if you don't mind. The one where, yeah. So the specificity that we had there to identify shared policy goals among member jurisdictions. Well, I think that's a hard thing for us to actually achieve, and maybe that's why we struck it from it. If you go to the next slide, it's almost too nebulous in my mind, or the next version, next iteration of it. So facilitate review of inclusionary zoning models and feasibility requirements among. So what to what end? I guess what's the purpose of this? Just review them, right? So there was a point to we did the review so that we could identify shared priorities. What's the so that on action item 6 now when we have the stricken language? Is there an outcome?
The outcome would, in this case, be the report and presentation to the executive board. It is a little bit, to your point, I think so that was the feedback. So Kia was concerned that the identifying shared policy goals would potentially create more like there was some concern that maybe it would create some disconnect or be a little bit more challenging to find across the skip cities. And so that was the thinking behind removing it.
Well, yeah, but I guess what do we, so action item 6 used to have the shared policy goals, I guess would have been like the third bar on this slide, right? The what we do with that report, right? I guess we receive the report. I guess as city officials, I'm used to receiving reports as a part of a legislative process. It's like it's a thing we do, but we typically then use that report to inform a housing action plan, a something. So I guess it just seems like we've lost a little bit of the next so that, right? We employ a person so that we can facilitate a review, so that we can have a report, so that we cities can do something of value to our member jurisdiction. So I guess I'm wishing there was a connection here. By removing that, I feel like we've lost the connection of what the value is. So what is there something, am I missing? Is there another place where we are explicit about the value of the report?
No, in the work plan, this is the only language in relation to the IZ report.
So then, yeah, maybe Eric's hand is up because he's going to help me understand something, as he often does.
Actually, I was just
Eric?
agreeing with James. I think Arch and Skip both offer value in helping identify and consolidate models that are working well. And I think there's partly a feedback loop to the county and state to be able to observe interlocal groups of cities innovating and identifying successful strategies that don't have to kind of come down, top down from the county or from the state, but can operate more at the grassroots level. I think there's value keeping it in. Whether or not we end up innovating and leading and demonstrating models that work, or at least can consolidate around goals that help member jurisdictions reach further, or justify to councils, the sense of a group effort or solidarity between member cities. I think that there's value keeping it in. And James, I'm not sure if that's what you were referring to specifically, but as you were speaking, those are the things that occurred to me about the value of having something like that.
Yeah, Chair, are you okay with us kind of having a conversation back and forth like this?
Yeah, I'm fine. We won't rely on Robert's rules.
Thank you, and thank you for not making me vote to set aside the procedure for it. I mean, Eric, I think that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out. Is we removed the ultimate point of the facilitation of the review, and so if we put it back in, I'm okay with it. I think it's almost like it might be an impossible thing to include as like a checkbox or a check to show that we have done the thing. Will we actually align on it? I don't know, right? So if you go back a slide, Dorsal, maybe we removed it because we realized that it's quite difficult for all of our jurisdictions to actually align on a shared policy goal as it relates to inclusionary zoning models. Is there another policy goal we can set or a thing after indicator? Because that's what I'm trying to figure out, Eric, is like, are we just agreeing that we can't get to this shared policy goal and therefore there is nothing after the report, or do we want to refine the actual policy goal so that there's someplace we're leading to? And I'm agreeing with you, and I think you just agreed with me. This is a great meeting for me.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So what's the thing we want to do? If we don't think we can identify a shared policy goal related to inclusionary zoning, then we facilitate the review. We come up with a report so that we do what? Inform our cities or inform the Wishvik or something. I guess I'm not. I'll mute
One
myself.
of the thoughts I had with the report was in kind of developing it similarly to the sub-regional preservation strategy. So it would be potentially a document that the cities could use, kind of like in that cookbook mentality. I'm not sure if that necessarily gets to the point you're making, though.
It could actually, Dorsal, because this could be part of a so we create a sub-regional inclusionary zoning feasibility report, so and present it to cities or maybe just the staff work group, right? So that as cities are looking at what are we all on year 2, 3, 4 of comp plans, right? That we have a report on inclusionary zoning models. I don't know that that gets to the point that this would really be something that we as electeds would be moving into legislation. Whereas earlier we were talking about this was not part of a how do cities write better ordinances. This was part of how do we advocate as a group for better statewide policies. So I think this is kind of shifting the target audience from state legislators to city councils and or their zoning and planning staff. Does that sound right?
I think so, yeah.
Sorry to drill it so hard into this one item. It caught my eye.
I think it's valid. I think the concern you're raising is kind of the concern Sokio had with having like it listed as shared policy goals in there was like, can we get to this alignment, or are we creating yeah.
So maybe the thing after indicator, there's action item, do the report, indicator, the report has been presented. Yeah. Feasibly prepared and presented. Presented to whom? Not to the legislators as part of our legislative summit. Or you can, but it's presented, and then my guess is that all of these 11 legislators that oversee our cities or whose jurisdictions overlap with our cities are going to say, what's your ask? And we're not going to be able to come up with one.
Yeah.
I don't want to present it to them without an ask. Maybe it needs some more work.
Yeah, I think the language needs more refinement. I think the one thing to flag is that we will need to adopt the work plan today. I'm happy to refine the language a little bit.
I mean, if we're talking about getting something passed today, then maybe in the indicator we talk about just prepared and presented to, if you want to just make it 2 relevant parties, just add 3 words. It's kind of weak. It's kind of my least favorite thing to do with something that's an actual, this is legislation that we're like, the things we do here count as a precursor to 11 different pieces of legislation that get adopted and approved by city councils. So it's a little bit of kind of a like hitting a foul ball and taking a foul instead of swinging at it, actually. But we're at the end of the line, and I didn't comment on it early enough to give you time to refine language in a way that the rest of the jurisdiction cities can support.
I think to some degree, with the county doing inclusionary zoning work in the unincorporated area this year, the hope was to potentially learn a little bit from the work they're doing and kind of build on some of that and see what areas that we could further develop that piece too. I believe, I don't know if Eric's hand was up. Christina, I think you just put your hand up.
Hey, Eric, was yours still up from the prior conversation? No.
His hand went
Okay.
up first.
All right, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. Dorsal, can we just maybe briefly revisit the consultant's concern? Was it a concern that interlocal entities like SKIP might go down a parallel track of policy goals, or diverge in their policy goals from a state or county strategy, or was it a different issue? I don't want to be putting words in their mouth or in yours.
I think part of it is that we have yet to really kind of get this heavily into like broad policy work. And there were some questions about whether or not we would actually, I think, have shared policy goals across the member cities. And whether or not we would actually be able to get to a place of consensus, I think, and presenting to you all what we discovered.
Okay, yeah, and one of the reasons I ask is I was recently in some meetings with Department of Commerce and cities on the east side that are ARCH members, and I've been following the ARCH process. And there's been some discussion in the governor's office about allowing entities like ARCH and SKIP to collectively fulfill some of the goals in House Bill 1220, things like that. I think there's some growing realization that entities like ours are important in developing shared policy goals, and it can possibly help the state and the county and entities like Commerce get around some of the difficult blockers in recent legislation that's passed by allowing SKIP and ARCH to start upsizing their influence. So I just wouldn't want to back it out hastily if our likely future is going to take us back to wanting to identify shared policy goals anyway.
Hey, Christine. Oh, go ahead, Dorsal.
I was going to say, I do think there was, so Keogh did not have full consensus on removing these. There was some discussion. The majority suggested removing the language, but yeah.
I'll just chime in.
Yes, please.
For the sake of time. Thank you. When we originally went through these slides, and Dorsal, when you were speaking about these, in addition to them just being up up as a slide, I understood it as something that, as a piece of information that we would gather throughout 2027 to then share and understand what we want to do within 2028. The climate of the state changes pretty regularly. The climate of housing has been changing quite rapidly. And perhaps in 18 months, things will shift and just look different, whether it be for SKIP or for everyone outside of SKIP. So when I read that, it was almost as is used as an informative piece. And if, hold on just one second, facilitate review of inclusionary zone and these requirements to share among member jurisdictions. And it's not like when I say it from that perspective where, this is a tool, then identify becomes a really strong goal. Like James says, I mean, this will be legislation. But if we, and I could be wrong, and then this is where from where I'm sitting, my perspective is this is a tool to be used for 2028, not something that is implemented as hard legislation for 2027. And I wonder if we could somehow, and I don't want to diminish it and make it like a foul ball, like you were saying. I don't want to soften it to mean nothing, but maybe we could restructure it to be used as that for 2028, and then obviously revisit in a year from now, and perhaps change, remove, add, who knows? James, you have some.
James?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I didn't want to gum up the works, but I just think because maybe someone can clarify, the action plan comes before all of our city councils, right?
Yes.
And gets some level of review. And I've got a few eagle eyes on my city council who I think are going to look at this and ask me, why are we preparing a report? Right? Are we signing on to something? So I think there's a way in which the stricken language, even though it's a little vague in and of itself, gives us a little bit of like this is why we do this, right? It gives me just a little something to bring back. It's like, well, why are we putting an ordinance in place that agrees to the action plan? Honestly, I think, CTAC, we can probably have some conversations and pass it either way with or without the stricken language. But I think the idea there is still valid. And I understand why the planners might remove it, or what the was it SKHHP dorsal that was yeah, but it just as I'm just trying to look at it as a lawmaker, right? Which is that it's got to have a little more specificity of the purpose of what we do with the report. I cannot commit CTAC to being beholden to a report in a nebulous way that would override anything our planners are already doing. I think our planners are doing a good job. So if it's to help the combined legislators identify a shared policy goal, I'm actually okay with keeping it in. Also, not wanting to make everyone's Friday drag too late. It started raining, right? We were supposed to be sunny May. Well, at least in SeaTac it's raining, but South King is a big place. It may be sunny down there in Auburn.
No, but it's not raining yet. Oh no, I just saw a drop. Yeah.
Those are the tears of the clouds listening to me blather on about a very, very small action.
There was a song like that. Oh no, wait, it was Tears of a Clown. I'm not calling you a clown.
I feel like I've spoken my piece. I'm okay passing it as is, but I want us, as we look at things like this, I want us to always keep that kind of like this. We've got to all stand up behind this as a frankly a piece of legislation.
Right. Any other comments on this item? Okay. Any other? And Dorsal, did you have more to go on this, or?
Not for the work plan and budget unless there's additional questions.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions on it? Okay, then if I am reading correctly, we need a motion to approve resolution number 2026-03, correct?
Yes, Mayor, although the current resolution has the language on the slide stricken from it. And so if the board would like to add it back.
Okay, then there would need to be a motion to amend.
Yeah.
Right, is there a motion to amend the work plan? I am not
pondering. Sorry, Chair, I'm pondering.
No, that's okay. Ponder away.
Is there any chance? So I move to amend the work plan to include retain the stricken language with the inclusion of the word potential shared policy goals.
I second.
To identify, just to make sure that we're giving ourselves the option of keeping that or not. I don't want to be charged with identifying, like we have to identify or else we have failed in our effort to.
James, can you say that again?
I move that we retain the stricken language to identify shared policy goals, or amend the stricken language to identify shared policy goals to read to identify potential shared policy goals among member jurisdictions.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I accidentally discussed as I was making the motion. Apologies.
you are allowed to provide an explanation after you've made the motion, after the second. So, hearing no additional discussion, all those in favor of the amendment to read for action item 6, facilitate a review of inclusionary zoning models and feasibility requirements to identify potential shared policy goals among member jurisdictions, and the indicator to read sub-regional inclusionary zoning for potentially shared policy goals, right? And feasibility report prepared and presented. Please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Right, the amendment has passed. But did we have a motion on the table for the full passage of resolution 2026-03?
Not
I
yet.
move
so
that
moved.
we pass. Oh, second.
We should have done that first, but okay. We have a motion.
Do we
and
need to backtrack it, Chair?
Well, yes, we really should. We should have the motion first
I
for
move that
the
we
work
pass.
plan.
I move that we pass the original proposal,
Work plan and budget. Thank
the
you.
original work plan and budget.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we
I
have a
move that
motion
we,
and
and then if you look for it, I'm ready to move.
go right ahead.
I move that we amend as previously stated.
Thank you. And is
I
there a
second.
second? Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the amendment as previously shared, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. The amendment passes. Now we will go to the main motion. All those in favor of resolution number 2026-03 for the 2027 SKIP work plan and budget, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. The 2027 SKIP work plan and budget for resolution 2026-03 passes. Thank you. All right. Great discussion. Thank you for that. Next is resolution number 2026-04, a resolution adopting the 2026 SKIP Housing Capital Fund guidelines. And so far, SKIP has invested, this is amazing, in over 500 units of affordable housing in South King County. And as we prepare for the 2026 funding round, we will review and discuss the draft Housing Capital Fund guidelines. So we'll consider these for adoption today, which would open an approximate $5.5 million in funding for this year's round. I hope you can all just take a moment. Just take a moment, and those two sentences have a lot of weight in them for what has occurred in SKIP in a relatively short amount of time. 500 units we've invested in, and over 5.5 or approximately $5.5 million in funding this year. I want to say kudos to every one of you for the work that you continue to do to support the work of SKIP, and Dorsal and the advisory committee and the staff working group, and so Kehoe and everyone else involved in this, for the amazing work, the dedication, the passion, and the compassion that has been shown time after time again to make sure that we are getting housing that's affordable in South King County. Kudos to all of you for that. I will turn it over to Dorsal for the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. I am incredibly excited to be here at this moment presenting the 2026 draft guidelines. I just want to shout out the picture here. This is a picture from Millers Creek in Burien. This is one of the first projects that you all funded. And not only can you see completed homes that you funded in this picture, but I would like to share that at least 5 of the homes have families that have been selected for purchase. So it's not just built, it has families getting ready to buy and move in. And so the work that you've done through SKIP has had an impact, and it will continue to have an impact today.
And
so is
Dorsal,
that
if I can just say, I went to the grand opening and the ribbon cutting of Millers Creek. It is a beautiful facility. The housing is very, very nice. And the families that were there were so excited. There was one family who was going to get housing that the parents didn't tell their kids until that day that they were going to have a new home. And just the impact of that. They were just so proud, and those kids were so excited to know that they were going to have a place to call home that was theirs. So again, sorry, I get a little emotional when things like that, but it was just such an amazing day. The sun was out, it was beautiful. And the families, some were moving in later this year, and they were all there as well. It was just such a beautiful sight to be there and be able to celebrate and represent SKIP.
it is there's a virtual tour still available for people that would like to see the actual inside of these homes. I'm happy to share those. All right. As the chair has shared, I'm really excited to say that we have roughly $900,000 available in our substitute House Bill 1406 bucket this year. And then we have around 4.6 million available in our House Bill 1590 funds. This does include the 1.9 million that had been previously awarded to the Pandean at Star Lake. So yes, that means for this year in 2026, we will have about 5.5 million available to invest in our communities. Here's the recommended timeline for the 2026 funding round. If the Housing Capital Fund guidelines are adopted today, the materials will go live on our website on Monday. The timeline has not changed too significantly from last year. We will still require a pre-application meeting from May until August. And then the final application will be due the first Wednesday in September, so September 2nd. And the advisory board will basically get the applications the very next day. One significant difference to call out, though, is that this year we are asking that the advisory board make their funding recommendation at their December meeting. And then we would ask the executive board to hold a special meeting on December 11th. This allows us to move our final recommendation into December, which aligns with the other public funders. So I'll be able to speak a little bit more strongly about some of the decisions the other public funders will be making around that time period. And so for the 3-step review process for the 2026 funding round, it will be the same as last year, except for in step 2, slightly modified to include that we will be meeting in December to make the funding recommendation. We'll meet early in December because I know that it is an incredibly busy month for you all, but it can be a fun way to end the year and a good way to celebrate the holidays. Funding recommendations are a great holiday gift. Here you can see the application materials that we require for our projects. While we aren't making significant changes to the materials, I do want to flag that the format will look slightly different from previous years. This is to transition our application materials to be ADA compliant. So materials will still be the same. It'll just look slightly different as we use accessible technology. There is, however, one request that the advisory board would like to make. The advisory board would like to remove the skip narrative addendum from the application materials and replace it with a document that better communicates the local connections that the project has. So before I talk a little bit more about that, I just briefly want to share what the narrative addendum is. So the narrative addendum is a document that the SKIP Advisory Board developed. It's a list of these 6 questions that you can see on the slide here. This was to just really try and get deeper into how a project aligns with the specific needs in South King County. Part of the reason why the advisory board is recommending moving away from the document is because most of the information in these questions already exists in the applications, and they didn't feel like these specific questions necessarily got them a deeper insight into the projects while they were doing their evaluations. Specifically, the advisory board felt that they were able to better evaluate projects when they had more information around the local partners for that project. So in an example, during last year's evaluation, we had some applicants who listed community partners that our advisory board, being South King County residents, knew that partner actually did not operate currently in the jurisdiction the project was being located in. Other applicants did have partners that had longstanding relationships in our communities. And since community connections is one of our priorities that the advisory board evaluates, they felt having a little bit deeper information about these types of partnerships potentially would provide them with a better form of evaluation. So in that note, I began work on what is referred to as a community partnership framework. Had some of the support with some of our wonderful staff work group, and this would have been a structured approach to not only building a deeper understanding of local community partnerships, but it would also started to develop lines of communication and further support in an effort to ensure that SKIP funded projects are able to successfully integrate into our communities. While I was able to make a decent start on the partnership framework, I did not have enough time to develop, I think, a truly solid draft for your review. The advisory board did review my draft at their meeting last week, and they felt that it needed some more time to be looked at, and some work needed to be done to ensure that we're capturing the types of partnerships that all SKIP funded projects would have. Differences, for example, between rental project partnerships and homeownership projects. The other thing that the advisory board identified is that before developing this framework, they'd really like to work with the executive board to have a deeper understanding about what the executive board defines as a successful community partner from the SKIP perspective. So my intent is to continue to work on the community partnership framework, but to instead request that this year we replace the narrative addendum with simply a letter of interest from a community-based partner within the jurisdiction. And so that local definition here would be a partner that is located in the city or in the jurisdiction that the project is located in. This is just a quick letter to help the advisory board better identify what partner is tied with the project, and if that partner is indeed, in fact, a local partner to the community. So moving from the application materials to some of our eligibility requirements. Here on the slide, you can see the substitute House Bill 1406 eligibility. While there were some changes in the state legislature in regards to both 1406 and 1590 eligibility, I did not see anything that appeared to impact our work, at least when it comes to the capital fund guidelines this year. And similarly, on this slide, you can see the House Bill 1590 eligibility. It's very similar to the substitute 1406 eligibility, with one real major difference, and that being that the funds do need to go to projects that are serving at least one of the population groups that are identified on here: veterans, seniors, households with behavioral health disability or another form of disability, survivors of domestic violence, and people at risk of homelessness or leaving homelessness. Now, here's the list of ineligible activities for the Housing Capital Fund. Most of these are taken straight from the RCW, but in 2025, so last year, the Executive Board did add the final bullet to ineligible activities to just clearly denote that emergency shelter, transitional housing, or emergency housing is not eligible to apply for Housing Capital Fund dollars. My intention was to bring this forward to the Executive Board at our April meeting to just have a check-in and gauge the temperature of the board, since this was something we did new last year, to just determine if this is something that we wanted to keep this year. I did briefly have an opportunity to discuss it with our advisory board, and from the advisory board perspective, they did feel comfortable with allowing transitional housing projects to apply, but raised some potential complications that I just wanted to talk about briefly as we talk about and do a check-in on this topic. But before I do that, I just want to ensure that we have a shared definition of what transitional housing is. So here on this slide, you can see the WAC definition for transitional housing, which is what I used as a previous transitional housing provider. I think one of the key components to understand about transitional housing is that it does have a set time limit. So a household can only stay in the program for 24 months. There's really very little wiggle room as a service provider for me to move past that 24-month mark. The intent and the hope is always for that household to transition from transitional housing to long-term housing, whether that's a market rate apartment or permanent supportive housing or some other form of housing. But I'm not going to misrepresent or lie to this board. As a provider, there were times when I was serving households that would leave transitional housing because that 24-month mark had been hit and they returned to either emergency shelter or to homelessness. And so no matter how good of a case manager you are, no matter how willing your participant is, if there is no affordable housing stock, there is nowhere for that family to move on to past transitional housing in that 24-month mark. Additionally, transitional housing contracting would be slightly different than the current contracting that we've been doing with part of the capital fund. So there's additional thoughts and considerations that potentially go into developing those contracts. And then finally, the advisory board has primarily focused its application review on the construction and development of housing. Moving into reviewing transitional housing projects would potentially require the advisory board to begin to evaluate and consider programming and operations of the housing. The advisory board includes service providers who have the skills and talents to potentially do this work, but similar to the partnership framework, the advisory board would really want to work with the executive board to determine kind of what the executive board defines as a successful housing program. Like, what would the executive board really want them to look at and evaluate when looking at these transitional housing applications? And so while I am happy to serve completely at the direction of the board, I think I would recommend that we maintain the current ineligible activities from the 2025 guidelines. And we take time between the 2026 and the 2027 funding round for the advisory board and the executive board to really work together to consider what it would mean to allow transitional housing projects to apply for funding in the future, and exactly what the executive board would want evaluated and reviewed to ensure that we're being good stewards of SKIP capital fund dollars. Oh, James?
Chair, is it okay if I ask a question here?
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, Dorsal, I'm wondering if is there any reason why transitional housing would conflict with the source that most cities use, like 1406 or anything like that? I think 1406 allows it. I know there's another, I can't remember what the other cities use for doing this, but if some of the capital sources, right, will restrict based on, it may be ineligible through that. I can't imagine we would have had it allowed without, like, if it was statutorily not allowed. But I just wanted to double check on that point. And the second point is I'm actually completely fine with it, just as a general thing. I'm fine with it being ineligible, because I think the kinds of projects we're looking at in South King are not these kinds. And I think transitional housing projects are at the moment being looked at by the county and ought to be funded there.
From my research and review, it looks like both 1406 and 1590 potentially could support a transitional housing project if they were to apply.
Thank you.
Eric.
I can also hold my questions, Chair, if that's preferred.
So questions about the transitional housing piece or sort of overall?
Yeah, transitional housing.
I think might as well have the conversation.
Okay. From my standpoint, while I agree with the instinct to really be cautious and take more time, I actually see allowing transitional housing as opening up an important investment channel for South King cities. I think one of the real missing pieces has been transitional housing in the state and county strategy, and the wraparound services that are necessary for kind of the graduated pathway of people exiting homelessness. And if we pass it this year and allow allow transitional housing projects to apply, cities and SKIP still have the ability to say no if it's something that we sense isn't congruent with the values of our residents or the goals that we have as cities. But allowing it does let us start taking a look at the types of applicants that would surface, and having a deeper examination of the wraparound services, understanding the relative success rates of different programs and different providers, and then preparing ourselves for whether it be in 2026 or 2027, a deeper investment in the types of models that, looking at holistic individual well-being, allow us to say, okay, our money is not just a place-based thing of, is an individual living outside or are they living inside, but our money is an investment in an individual's progression towards a future state of self-sustainability and durability, resilience. So I'm interested in it, but of course that's just one person's opinion, and I could, whether we pass it now or pass it in or keep talking about it throughout 2026, I do think it's important for us to keep talking about at least.
No, thanks, Eric. James.
My turn to agree with Eric. Actually, I think he's right. It's okay to leave it on there because cities, sometimes we get confused. I do. I look at this sometimes as a city council person and not as an executive board member of an ILA, where I still have a level of review from city staff about whether or not our funds will be eligible for this. So I'm actually okay with it staying in there. I could go either way, but we'll gladly listen to any dissenting or concurring opinions.
Okay, thank you. Got a hand up that just says skip panelist.
Oh, my apologies. I need to name myself. This is Jelani Jackson from the county. So in my personal experience working as a supportive housing case manager for the VA for 7 years, transitional housing is really good for a very narrow slice of people who truly can become economically independent and move on to market rate housing. I think the challenge in our region is just building enough housing, period. King County would recommend that SKIP focus on building housing stock as their primary means of addressing this issue.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the item of transitional housing? I'm going to weigh in really quickly. I am supportive of exploring the possibility. I think that there are very different models out there and very different providers out there. And so having the conversation with an applicant around success rate for transition into stable permanent housing, I think that's a really important thing. And my gut tells me that those numbers could be very different between providers and the model that they have, that they're working with folks and families during that, that 1 to 2 year period that they're in transitional housing. And so that is my only hang up on this, is if we're funding transitional housing and, 30% of the people are successful and the rest are not, I'm uncomfortable with that. If their success rate is 90%, then I think it absolutely fills a gap in housing that is needed. So I'm good with adding it in with the guardrails. And James, to your last point, there is that final check, right? That a city could say yes or no. And so having the information for the city on how the program is run and what their track record is, I think would be a really important component if we were to allow funding for transitional housing.
Yes, Chair, and credit where it's due. That was actually Eric's point that I restated.
All right. So, and Eric, thank you. And James, thank you for agreeing with Eric. And now we'll call on Eric again.
Yeah, and this is just a quick response in general, or perhaps to the question that came from our colleague from King County. When you look at the population stock and flow dynamics of which populations will most benefit from affordable housing stock, to an extent, you can influence the size of that population by investing in individual or household economic success. And transitional housing, I think, certainly if we were to prove successful models of it or scale those models, then you can start interacting with the economic dynamics of households so that they exit the pool of the population, the demographic that is most in need of affordable housing stock, and they can graduate to greater household economic success through the programs that hopefully could be embedded in and scaled up in transitional housing. But I think the risk of the county and the state not making more investment in that approach is then the population dynamics of the demographic that are most in need of transit or most in need of affordable housing could start to only stagnate. You have more inflow than you have outflow because there isn't sufficient service infrastructure to have a greater outflow than inflow. And so I think, whether it's transitional housing or whether it's independent standalone investment in services, I think we do risk running into a population dynamics problem of if we make too much investment in affordable housing stock, but we're not investing in the services infrastructure that decreases the population in need of affordable housing, then we have a real problem. But I think this is also like a workshop and roundtable discussion. It's not something that philosophically or even operationally we can address just in a SKIP meeting as one agenda item. I think it's a more fundamental conversation that needs to happen probably countywide or even with Department of Commerce as to what is the balance, and are cities being asked to participate in a strategy that does at least offer some promise that the population itself in need of affordable housing is shrinking over time instead of only growing over time.
Thank you, Eric. Brian.
Thanks, Mayor. Part of our mission is affordable housing at all income levels, and I know a lot of our housing needs analyses show that the very lowest end of the income spectrum has the greatest need as far as our future needs analysis. A lot of them don't specifically call out transitional housing, but their income levels generally fall in that very low, extremely low income bracket. So I agree with including this into our scope and efforts. I believe it is part of affordable housing, though it may not be extremely permanent. It is a necessary part of the overall affordable housing needs of our region.
Thank you. So Dorsal, do you have more on this presentation, or are we ready to take some action?
I have a little bit more with the priorities
Okay.
and yeah.
Okay, then we'll circle back and I'll ask for a motion.
Thank you, Vice Chair. All right. For the 2026 funding priorities, I did not add or remove any of the 2025 priorities. And I did work with a couple of staff work group members to update some of the language we had previously used on our guidelines. This work was done to update the language, similar to work that I believe many of the member jurisdictions did when updating their comprehensive plan or other documents to attempt to align with some of the preferred language at the federal level. In the draft guidelines in your packet, every item I modified based off of this work is highlighted in yellow. On the slides we're going to review, the language that's been modified is in green. I just want to add that one final note. In the draft and on the slides, the priorities are not in alphabetical order. I will put them in alphabetical order in the final version. I wanted to show which of the priorities had been replaced. So they're in the order that they would have been in 2025 with the new language, if that makes sense. So as an example, on the slide, we had a priority last year called disproportionate impact. That has been modified in your draft to be housing need and access. And you can see the language that's been developed. The goal and the intent was to not change the intent or the application of the priorities or the criteria. It was merely to align with preferred federal language. And then there were no changes to these four funding priorities from 2025 to 2026. And then we did change on this priority. We replaced the racial equity priority with housing access and opportunity. And similar to the priorities, I went through our general and specific criteria and only modified the language. These should look almost entirely the same as 2025. But I did replace the first general criteria, which was advancing the goals of equity, to advancing housing access and stability. I do want to acknowledge that one addition to the general criteria that was requested by the advisory board was the inclusion of households with disabilities in the advancing housing access and stability goals. And so I did add that language after the below 30% AMI. Okay. And then moving into the specific criteria, I did not change any of the language for specific criteria A, which is around the development and operating budget. But I did similarly in B with project readiness, the language is the same as in 2025. But for the development team track record specific criteria, we did slightly modify the language again to align with preferred federal language. And then the property and asset management capacity specific criteria is the same as in 2025. And then the displacement and relocation specific criteria has had language slightly changed. And then criteria F, the title was changed to supporting housing stability and access. And then the final specific criteria is the nature of the location. And the only language changed here was the final bullet. And that similarly was done to align with preferred federal language. And that is what I have for the capital fund guidelines. I'd be happy to answer questions or take direction.
Thank you, Dorsal. We'll start with Eric and then go to Carmen.
Yeah, thank you, Dorsal. I want to say I really appreciate and can tell how much work went into this. And there was certainly a lot of thoughtful deliberation among the folks that worked on it. That being said, I did a line-by-line review, and I did have a number of concerns, and I noted, I think, 8 different areas of concern that I shared with the chairs. And, I don't have to go through all of those, but my overall concern was, I think some of the language calibration specifically starts to weigh projects and kind of assign higher scores towards the kind of projects that are closer to a housing first model or to the permanent supportive housing model. And specifically, I think it's the language on barriers and making sure that the investments that SKIP is making is to minimize the barriers that exist for people who are experiencing housing instability or at risk of housing loss. The challenge for that is that takes us squarely into the question of substance use and codes of conduct in housing, the low barrier housing versus the higher barrier housing. That's my concern anyway, because the largest population, at least in King County, that we see epidemiologically that's at risk of housing instability and housing loss is the population that experiences substance use disorders. Because under those circumstances of substance use disorder, it's extremely hard to participate in sustainable income generation. And the more regular outcome is loss of income. And so I wanted to make sure that we weren't shaping the guidelines in a way that started to overly weigh towards projects that were low barrier housing projects. And there's a couple specific points that I want to reference. One of them is the displacement clause that was on page 12, which you had up a moment ago, but it talks about not having an activity or an action taken that could affect residents who were at a heightened risk of housing instability. But I'm worried that would discourage applications from housing developers or housing projects where there would be an expectation of a code of conduct or of some type of substance use prohibition. One of the other things I wanted to call out was a shift in the underwriting guidelines, where permanent supportive housing projects would have a special debt coverage ratio, which follows, I think, just what the combined funders are recommending this year. But the 1.0 debt coverage ratio for permanent supportive housing that exists for permanent supportive housing really is just because of how financially troubled those projects are. And so I'm not sure if we as SKIP would want to extend the Band-Aid that the combined funders have come up with for permanent supportive housing of allowing them to have a riskier funding underwriting. I think sticking with the 1.2 helps make sure that we're directing our scarce tax dollars into the projects that have the greatest likelihood of funding sustainability. And just one final comment, and again, I think there's probably about 8 core things to go through, but you know, the question of 30% AMI and the 0 to 30 AMI group, you know, this is such a tough one because, of course, commerce has and you know, statute has required that we be active in that segment, but there really isn't a way for market housing to exist for that demographic. And if you're looking at the 0 to 30% AMI group, it begins at the very top at 30 AMI. That begins significantly below one adult working full-time minimum wage. And most of that population is non-working adults or adults with very, very, very low levels of work or those subsisting on benefits. And so if we begin weighing again more heavily towards 0 to 30% AMI projects versus, say, the working poor, you know, which would be like 30 to 60% AMI, I think we start taking SKIP in a direction that's probably not aligned well with what the member jurisdictions are interested in seeing. And so throughout these guidelines, I just wanted to make sure that this year we weren't, without realizing it, embarking on a new set of guidelines that began scoring projects more highly that weren't the types of projects that member jurisdictions are most interested in supporting. I can pause there because I've mentioned a lot, but again, I think there's maybe 8 specific things that need fixes to make the guidelines, you know, really dialed in with what my suspicion is most of the member jurisdictions are interested in seeing.
Thank you, Eric. It's a lot to digest and maybe try and break it apart piece by piece. I've got a couple of questions. We'll call in Carmen first.
Thank you so much, Chair. I really do appreciate it. I wanted to say that I don't entirely agree with Eric's concerns, and I would really encourage us to also review the most recent UW, because I know Eric loves his data and reports, and so we don't want to be siloed or have any kind of tunnel vision. There was a UW sociology report done in 2025 called The Portrait of the Unhoused. I encourage everyone to take a look at it just to kind of address what is being talked about. That is separate than why I raised my hand. I have a question first for Dorzel. What are the consequences if we don't change certain language to quote unquote follow federal preferences? I don't know. I'm sure I'm not the only one here who's kind of uncomfortable with how we've had to kind of change certain language because of the federal standards. And I just kind of wanted to understand the consequences better before I try to pick at this at all.
As I understand it, the potential consequences are that it creates a form of liability for the cities that are part of SKIP. I'm not sure. My understanding is that it potentially opens up a possibility where cities would not be eligible to apply for federal funding or could be at risk of losing federal funding. I see the chair is back and put her hand up, and she, I believe, has more experience on this topic.
Thank you, Dorzel. Yes, you are correct. It does, if we do not follow federally approved or preferred guidelines, there is the risk of us losing federal funds or not being eligible for those funds. I know most cities, if not all, have had to go through and scrub language, especially for us with our airport, and I would imagine with Renton as well. Those FAA grants are very specific, and not only would we not be eligible for them, we would have to pay back what we had already received. So that's where the risk is, whether we like it or not. I would think that many of us on this call don't like some of the language that we've had to remove. And I have always said, I don't care what the language says as long as I know what we're doing is the right thing. So, Carmen, to answer your question, yes, it does pose some prospective liabilities to our member cities.
Thank you so much, Chair. I just wanted to better understand that, and I appreciate that, and just a general validation for how unfortunate this is. But yes, I have no qualms with what we have to do in order to maintain our federal funding. So thank you so much.
Looks like we have a skip. Whoever, they did not change their name at the beginning. Skip panelist, whoever you are.
This is James. I
James,
switched
okay.
devices and
Got it.
I didn't transfer my switch over. Sorry.
You're trying to trick
Tupelo,
us.
a neighboring skip city. Yeah. No, I was just going to echo. I agree with changing it due to application and statutory things on that side, but also want to elevate what Eric said as needing further. Maybe we should expound on that further. Probably not at today's.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. And my apologies, I'm not sure exactly where we are in this dorsal. And Dana, thank you for stepping in. Eric, I see that you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I wanted to be helpful in my feedback because I had mentioned that I provided written feedback that wasn't shared with the executive board, but was sent to the chairs. My recommendation is, I think, a language calibration where I understand the need to change it for the purposes of federal funding. I understand that. I think that we may have changed it in a way that indicated or created a scoring bias or a scoring preference for projects that more closely resemble what's classically been referred to as the housing first approach, or further supporting the types of housing programs that have lower barriers or no barriers. And I imagine that there's a way to further calibrate the language throughout that doesn't imply or suggest to applicants that they would be scored more highly if they were those kinds of projects. But I do think it's important that calibration happen because I think if we were to lock this in, perhaps we're creating a application process that would result in a larger number of projects being proposed that cities were just unlikely to support. And, I don't want to create lost work for staff or for applicants. The purpose of the guidelines is really to help applicants understand the goals and philosophy of the funding entities. And I'm just not sure on how we describe the target demographics that is being clearly communicated. But again, that's just my opinion. And, whatever the majority is supportive of, that's what we'll do.
Thank you. Christina.
Thank you. I feel like my brain has been wobbling in my head over the details because I understand the language that has to be scrubbed. I also, and I don't know how to do this. I would love to see results incentivized where, and this isn't going to be difficult to explain, but where, like we talked about previously about transitional housing and Dana mentioned the percentages of success rates is without being uncompliant or, is there a way to incentivize success rates whatever kind, whichever income bracket that's in. But I understand the perspective that Eric is coming from, where it also almost seems like um, we're capturing a very specific subset um, in our criteria, and that's not a problem. However, I would hate to think that we're discouraging those who could bring real results-oriented housing. If I'm confusing anyone, I'm sorry. There's a lot going on up here, but in my heart and in my mind, I want to see people succeed. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we're here for. That's what SKIP's about. That's what that's the goal. And how do we structure our verbiage to achieve that? There's not an answer. I'm not looking for one, but I think that's just where I sit and where my thoughts are with that. Thank you.
And I could share, last year, the advisory board did attempt, so the previous executive manager through the public funders received what's referred to as WeBar's data on some of the applicants that applied last year. So we were able to look a little bit at the success rate. We had some challenges though, because two of our applicants were newer, like nonprofits, and so we had strong data showing indicators for some of the applicants, but for a couple of the applicants, they had yet to generate data. But I think the advisory board shares kind of that desire of getting deeper into like the review of the actual success of the programs that are applying.
Anything else? Okay, Dorsal, I'm assuming there is no motion on the table yet. We were just going through the presentation.
Correct,
Or
Chair.
there is no, there isn't or yes, there is. Yes, the guidelines for 2026-04, right?
No one has made that motion yet.
Okay. Dana?
Thank you. So just as a little bit of catch up, so we did have some conversation around the inclusion or exclusion of transitional housing and that piece of this conversation, and then the points that Eric had included in his previous email. So we're probably at a point where a motion needs to be made and then amendments.
Thank you.
So I will make that underlying motion.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Any amendments? Eric?
I think it would probably address a lot of my concerns to clarify that where we state barriers to housing opportunity, or where we refer to people at risk of housing instability, I wonder if there's a way to parse that and more strategically or philosophically focus on economic barriers, or the socioeconomic risks for housing instability. What I'm honestly trying to do is ask or tee up, do we want to try to insulate SKIP funds? No, insulate's the wrong word. Do we want to try to incentivize the types of projects that are really focused on kind of the economic side of the regional and state problem, and not so heavily incentivize projects that begin to cut across what we would consider, more of the behavioral health landscape and the possibility of individuals who, would depend on really the availability and increased supply of permanent supportive housing. And I tee that up just from the standpoint of, I think it's an important distinction to make. And if we think of the future of SKIP and the holistic individual well-being that I've described before, individuals that are getting to a point of independent housing and resilient and durable and increased economic success for themselves, their families, and households. I think that the economic model of affordable housing that targets those elements is probably more consistent and more well aligned with what South King County residents are interested in. I just think there's a lot of risk if we begin leaning too much into the permanent supportive housing or housing first types of strategies. But if that's a board decision, and so where we refer to in these new guidelines, the new language of addressing barriers to housing stability or preventing the displacement of individuals who are at greater risk of housing instability and housing loss. I wonder if we just try to be specific that we're not going to more highly score projects that are permanent supportive housing or housing first types of projects. And perhaps this is too specific and controversial of a distinction to make for the group of cities, in which case I could see why we would stay general and allow on a city by city basis, projects to be selected and advanced or not advanced. But I wanted to bring it up just because the writing of the guidelines this year does so strongly cut across what the combined funders have prioritized, and their language, which largely does appear here, I think is specifically meant to incentivize permanent supportive housing. That's it, though. That's not amendment specifically. It's just a question of is there interest among member cities to try to be specific that we're talking about economic barriers to housing and not behavioral barriers to housing.
Thank you. James.
Thank you, Chair. Mine was a point of clarification. Can I hear the motion restated, please?
So you're talking about the original motion?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, I believe it was just to the original motion was to adopt resolution number 2026-04.
Thank you, Chair. And further point, as the previous speaker said, there's no amendment on the table right now. We're just looking at that. Yep.
That is correct. That's where I was asking if there were any comments or any amendments. I'll move to Dana.
Thank you. So I am very supportive of trying to find a way to reinforce what Eric is saying around the economic barriers. I think that moving too far away from that is a much larger conversation that this group is already been talking about, sort of looking in what does that mean to expand SKIP and activation of the other H's and those kinds of things. So I am inclined to find some sort of path to reinforce, because it feels more in the spirit of affordable housing to me to be looking at those economic factors. The unfortunate thing is I don't have any language to put forward that would be anywhere near as correct as what Eric might have to present. So just showing support for that.
And Chair, sorry to jump in, but could it just be that instead of barriers, we say economic barriers, instead of displacement pressures, we say economic displacement pressures? I wonder if, at least for the moment, that's draft language that would allow us to more accurately target the types of proposals that we're cultivating. But if that's too imprecise and other members wanted to be broader, then I wouldn't want to be introducing language that began to, run counter to the strategies that other cities have.
Thank you. Christina?
Thank you. This is probably another one of those that would be an amazing roundtable in-person discussion. And yeah, I just, without suggesting a change, I want to bring that perspective from what we are doing here in Covington. Many may know that we do have a community resource officer that we use with our 1460 funds, that we fund with our 1460 funds. It's something where I believe we're pioneering that not many cities have, and it has real. So I'm sorry, I'm going to explain. Our officer drives the community resource officer is working in tandem with our police officers for those who may need more help on the streets, that provide them and connect them with resources, connect them with housing and or mental health and substance support. And it has been very clear that there is a distinction. And I am also in support of adding the economic, the word, even just the word. I know this is a bigger topic for perhaps another time, but it's where we see the most success, and Skip will eventually need to decide where we go with that. But and like Dana said, there has been conversations about the H's within Skip. But there is a difference, and the problem remains. We may not have the solution today, but I would support what Eric is saying, and the depths of that.
Okay, so, oh, Carmen?
I just a quick question. So what would the people who do have behavioral issues actually do if we're not going to be like trying to help anyone, and we're only gearing towards economic issues, if I'm to understand this correctly? I could be completely misunderstanding this, but from everything I've been hearing, is it to say that we're only focused on economic and not behavioral? And what does that actually mean for the demographics and people who are at risk? Because what will that actually do for the unhoused community if we were to only focus on one vulnerability and not the other?
Am I missing something? Because we do have households with disabilities, and we have not specified the disabilities to be physical, right? It's dorsal, it's any disabilities, and mental health challenges could be construed as disabilities under these guidelines, correct?
Correct, Chair. And the 1590 specifically calls out them as separate subpopulations,
Okay.
behavioral disabilities and then disabilities.
Okay. And so we have just gone with the more generic households with disabilities to encapsulate everything.
Correct, Chair.
Okay. Carmen, does that answer your question?
It does. It also just poses, so yes, I believe it does, if I'm to understand which definition of disability, because I'm wondering the behavioral versus the legal, because do they need a formal diagnosis? Because there are many people who are unhoused that may have mental health issues that do not have a formal diagnosis, right? And so then that kind of, and maybe I'm getting too in the weeds of this as someone who used to be a service provider, and please forgive me. It was just, this was posed by the conversation from Kristen and Eric that I wanted to kind of address. And so thank you so much for answering, because it does help. But yeah, I'm just more curious about if it requires, like, how is that measured or determined?
My understanding for projects that are accessing 1590 funds, they do have to have a documented disability as part of their housing application.
Thank you so much.
Anya?
Yeah, thanks. I think my concern is probably kind of in the same line then, as if we do add more clarity around the board's interest in prioritizing economic instability factors over behavioral. are we changing or affecting the ability of agencies to apply that would otherwise qualify for 1590 funds? Are we limiting our pool? And I don't know. I recognize I'm not a housing finance expert, but I just want to make sure that we're not kneecapping ourselves in terms of meeting the need and the spectrum of housing needs that could be coming towards us. So.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, I'm not going to make a motion on the barriers issue because I think, we haven't had enough time to talk about it. And I think it probably feels too rushed. And I'm not sure if we have really full board representation either, but it feels like such a big one to try to force through. So I don't want to force it through. I'm going to make an amendment on something specific, actually a couple specific things. I move that we strike from the consistency with underwriting standards the language that says unless PSH, then 1.0. And I recommend we strike that. And should I give an explanation for that recommendation?
Let me get a second, and then we will have you do the explanation. Is there a second on Eric's amendment motion?
I'll second for
Thank you for discussion. Thank you. All right, Eric, did you want to explain your motion?
Yes, the history of that, as I understand it from the combined funders, is the shift to 1.0 for permanent supportive housing was in recognition of the greater financial risk that accompanies those projects and the extent to which the projects have continued to depend on such heavy public subsidy. And my concern there is this was kind of a Band-Aid fix that's inside a very imperfect system where sustainability has not been demonstrated and where results haven't been demonstrated. And so personally with SKIP funds, I don't see the need to adopt that greater risk tolerance that the other combined funders have adopted. I think that it probably makes sense for SKIP to continue to have higher standard for financial sustainability and a lower threshold for risk. Sorry, a lower tolerance for risk compared to KCRHA and compared to the city of Seattle. And so for that reason, to try to make sure that the projects reaching the executive board for approval are those which have the greatest chance of financial sustainability, and that our portfolio overall continues to be less risky than that of the city of Seattle and KCRHA, I recommend that we strike the language that says unless PSH, then 1.0.
Okay. Is there any more discussion on the amendment that's before us of striking unless PSH, then 1.0? Right. Hearing none, all those in favor of the amendment to strike unless PSH, then 1.0, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no.
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 Okay, I think we're going to need to do a roll call on this one, Dorsal.
Yes, Chair.
Can you help with that?
Yes, ma'am. Nancy Backus.
Aye.
Dana Ralph.
Aye.
Anya.
No.
Christina.
Aye.
Christina Soltis.
Yes, I know she's not there.
Aye. Why? I don't know why you can't hear me. I can hear me.
I got Gene Axinger.
Gene said he may have to leave. His battery was almost gone. He was trying to find another power source, so he may not be on right now.
Brian Davis.
Aye.
Dedham Pearson. Okay. Eric Zimmerman.
Aye.
Carmen Rivera.
Nay.
James Lovell.
Nay.
Dennis Martinez.
Aye.
Jelani Jackson.
No.
I think I
believe
count
it's
6-4. Is that correct?
correct, Chair.
Okay. So the motion passes to strike unless PSH then 1.0. Is there any other discussion or any other amendments that you would like to bring forward?
I just have an extremely brief comment. I've been
Yes.
reading through the slides, and I'll just remind the board here that I was hired by King County to be the Health Through Housing Initiative Manager. I'm sure you're all familiar with those projects. As it's written, my interpretation is that just simply saying that you're going to favor projects with support services does not automatically equate to permanent supportive housing or low barrier housing. I think what you have here is fairly flexible, and I think Skip will have a variety of projects presented to it to be approved. And so I just wanted to make that distinction. I think y'all have done a great job of making sure that you're going to have a full spectrum of projects, not just necessarily low barrier, permanent supportive housing projects.
Thank you, Jelani. Eric?
Yeah, I have another motion. But is it okay to also just quickly affirm or respond to the comment from Jelani?
Yes.
I feel a little hurt in my heart while we're having this conversation because, of course, all we're doing here is trying to communicate information to applicants to help them understand how they can be the likeliest they can be to be successful and to attract the kind of projects that we think are the likeliest to pass city council review and approval. And ultimately, whatever these guidelines say, we can also get applications and submissions that are not in alignment with the guidelines. And these guidelines don't compel any particular decision from cities or from the advisory board or from others as to what actions they take. But I do see it as important because it helps to communicate to applicants how likely are they to be successful with SKIP funds, but then also to the advisory board and the scoring exercise they do, how to assign scores. And so really, I want to make sure that I'm not suggesting that we do or don't do a certain thing, but that instead we're just clear to not overly commit in a direction of strategy that misleads applicants and attracts applicants that ultimately are unlikely to be successful when they get down to the city level. And so really this is just a communications function, but not one that would obligate SKIP or obligate a particular city to do a certain thing. With that said, I am interested in making another motion about a separate item, which is the displacement clause, which Dorsal had referred to residents at heightened risk of housing instability. And I think from the document, it specifically discourages applicants who might have an activity which resulted in the displacement of residents at heightened risk of housing instability. My challenge with that was that we not discourage applicants that did have barriers as an element of their housing provision. And I think specifically the language about discouraging, that's a challenge. So the motion that I would suggest as that, and without seeing the specific language on the document, it's not up in front of me, but that we would direct staff to amend that so that it would not be discouraging or prohibitive for applicants who do in fact have a code of conduct or barriers for substance use that are a part of the housing provision that they do. So again, specifically to direct staff to amend that section to not suggest that projects will be reviewed unfavorably or be scored lower if those applicants have barriers as an element of their housing provision.
Second.
Okay.
That's James from CTAC, second motion.
Yep, got that. Thank you, James. Okay, so do you have specific language, Eric, that you want to see in that section?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chair. I'm just going to pull up the document now so that I can be very specific. So the language says any activity which would result in the displacement of existing residents, especially low and or moderate income residents or residents at heightened risk of housing instability, is discouraged. Because it's not specific as to what that really means, my fear was that may pull in displacement of individuals who are at risk of housing instability as a consequence of their own substance use disorder. And a number of the projects that we might find favorable, certainly in the city of Normandy Park and some of the other member cities, specifically, we are interested in the ones that cultivate a community of sobriety and, have an expectation that individuals who are in recovery and are still vulnerable economically and do depend on subsidized housing aren't surrounded by the influence of, an easy access to the distribution of harmful drugs. And as I read it, just a moment ago, I was worried that language would discourage applicants who did have a code of conduct or what we would call a higher barrier housing program. And my intent would be that those types of applicants not be discouraged. It's not to prevent the application of low barrier housing. It's to make sure that we're not preventing the application of higher barrier housing.
Chair, if I could,
yeah.
sorry. So the specific criteria E is explicitly applied for projects that the site has existing housing on. So last year we had the African Community Housing Development Project, which had an existing structure on site. And so that's the intent of E, is to solely encourage projects that if they are in the process of construction, demolishing or removing existing residential housing, that they will have a relocation assistance plan for those residents to find them new housing after construction. I don't know if that changes the conversation. I just wanted to clarify the intent of E.
Yeah, no, it does, Dorsal, I think. And I think that's where just specifically, and I could maybe withdraw my motion or modify my own amendment, but then to say, as a consequence of, site modification, or, as a consequence of site developments and construction. But I think then being specific as to that's the activity we mean, so that applicants who are reading it or the advisory board who's scoring it understand, what we specifically mean by that. So Dorsal, would you support then if I were to amend my motion or withdraw and make a new motion?
So Dorsal wouldn't be the one that needed to support that. It would need to be James, who was the second.
Right.
Chair, I think I'm not here to support this unless I see the motion. I just want to kind of table.
James, I'm sorry, you're all muffled. We can't hear you.
Sorry, Chair. Can you hear me now?
There we go. Yes, thank you.
Sorry about that. I think I need to table my second because I have to see the language a little more clearly in order to support it. We're just not quite there on it.
So you're removing your second?
Yes. Thank you, Chair.
All
right.
Yeah,
and I withdraw my motion.
Wonderful. We accomplished what we needed to accomplish in that, even though it came at it from a different angle. Okay. So that motion has been removed. Is there a new motion, Eric, that you would like to make?
Yes, I would like to amend section E, displacement and relocation, to state any activity as a consequence of construction or site modification, which would result in the displacement of existing residents, etc.
Okay. So, Dorsal, let me ask, you are the one that said this is based on displacement because of new construction, correct?
Correct, Chair.
So is it in a section where that is obvious and item E is just under that to where that would be duplicative, or is this something that needs that you would see would fit appropriately in section E?
I believe it would fit appropriately in section E. It's in this list, so that is the entirety of what it says about displacement and relocation in that section.
Okay. So we have a motion from Eric. Is there a second to add the now I'm not going to remember the wording. Dorsal, if you can.
Any activity as a consequence of construction or site modification.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
Chair, I'm not seconding, but aren't we at time?
Well, it is 3:03, but there's nothing in our bylaws that says we have to stop at 3. We do need to wrap it up. I need to go in a couple of minutes as well.
Yeah, I need to hop off as well, but I don't want to leave right before we vote because I know we're pretty close to a quorum.
Right.
But I also want to be respectful of everyone's time.
Correct. Okay, is there a second to the motion?
I would second that. And folks, I was just, sorry, it's Christina Soltis. I also do have to run to pick up my kids from school. I'm trying to stretch this as much as I can.
Understood.
I do like this last suggestion.
Okay, so you are seconding it, Christina?
Seconding it.
All right.
And then I'm an I, and then I have to go.
Okay, thank you. All right, and yes, so Dorsal, we have to have this done by when?
So since this is our last meeting until July, we need to have it ideally done today. We could do a special meeting in June, but if we wait till July, we will be out of line with the other public funders.
Okay. All right. I'm going to ask that hopefully everyone's comments are short so we can get to a vote on this. We won't go to the discussion item, but we will try and get this passed in the next couple of minutes. So we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion? James.
Apologies, Chair. I left my hand up from the previous item.
Okay.
No.
All right. Carmen, did you have your hand up or was that from your prior comment?
Prior comment, Chair. My apologies.
All right. Thank you. Is there any discussion on the amendment? All right. And Dorsal, you're checking. We still have a quorum.
We still have a quorum, yes.
All right. All those in favor of the amendment regarding construction being the reason for displacement and relocation, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, please say no.
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 Okay, we need to do a quick voice vote again.
Nancy Backus.
Aye.
Marina Hanson.
Subbing in for mayor, aye.
Anya.
No.
Christina.
I think she had to leave.
Jean.
She did say aye before she left, but I don't think that we could count that, right?
I don't believe that's in our bylaws. That's not permitted.
I would concur. Jean.
Jean didn't come back, I don't think.
Brian. Brian Davis.
I don't think Brian's on.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh.
I was switching audios and
Okay.
I did not hear the motion. My apologies.
Okay, go ahead, Dorsal, really quickly.
Eric Zimmerman.
Aye.
Carmen Rivera.
Nay.
James Lovell.
No.
Dennis.
Aye.
Jelani.
No.
5
Okay.
no votes. Go ahead.
Oh, I have 4 and 4 because we don't have Brian's vote. Could you explain the motion to Brian and then we'll get his vote?
The motion on the floor is to amend specific criteria E displacement relocation to read any activity that is a consequence in construction or site modification which would result in the displacement of existing residents, especially low and or moderate income residents or residents at heightened risk of housing instability, is discouraged.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And again, apologies. I had to leave, but I wanted to stay on the meeting.
Yeah.
My vote is aye.
Okay.
Also recognizing that Deedham Pearson from Maple Valley just came off mute.
Okay. Deedham?
Yes, sorry, I was on a panelist, so I was trying to raise my hand on the last one too. I'm an aye for City of Maple Valley.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we have 6-4, Dorsal. All
Yes,
right,
Chair.
the amendment passes. Is there any more discussion? Right, all those in favor of resolution number 2026-04,
Seems like there might be some emotion behind it.
please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. All right, the motion passes. All right, our discussion item on the SKIP 2026 Quarter 1 progress report, is that in our packets?
Yes, Chair.
Dorsal? Okay, so I would ask that you all refer to your packets for that information. And with that, Dorsal, I think that was the last item.
Correct, Chair.
We are adjourned. Thank you all for sticking with us today to get through this. I know it's challenging, but I do appreciate everyone. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, whether it's rainy or not. Find something that will bring you joy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, Mayor.